Hello everyone, Grandpa Ron here. We're going to continue our little Bible study series. We're moving pretty quick, and that was the intent, to be real basic and fundamental, so we're not getting real deep into things, but I have to apologize. There are times when I really need to insert some of the things that I've learned that are further ahead, but I'm trying to keep it very basic. And today we're going to talk about Genesis 5, which covers a period of time from Adam, the creation of Adam, through Noah. And then in chapter 6 we'll talk about, chapter 6 talks about the flood, the great flood. But today we're just going to focus on chapter 5. So let's jump in there. First of all, let me say that when we go through these genealogies, as I mentioned in a previous class, they're not all inclusive, and they jump around from time to time. But I don't know if it was a memory aid back then to remember these genealogies, but sometimes they're grouped in specific numbers. So-and-so begot so-and-so begot so-and-so, and then it'll start over again. So-and-so begot so-and-so. Well, there are other people in between there, so I'm not exactly sure why they're grouped the way they are, but it's real clear that it's not all-inclusive. And I would think that Moses probably had some reference material, either word of mouth that had been passed down and meticulously remembered, or there may have even been some written records of these genealogies. But here in verse 5, Moses continues to go through this genealogy. And remember in chapter 1 and chapter 2, the earlier chapters, when man sinned, God had warned warned Adam and Eve that if they ate from this certain tree, that they would surely die. And we're going to see the result of that, the continuing result of that in chapter 5. So let's look at it. Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day when God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female, and he blessed them and named them man in the day when they were created. So looking back, we remember that God created a perfect world. He blessed Adam and Eve. Their needs were provided for. There was only one restriction on them, and that was not to eat from the knowledge, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And of course they disobeyed God. They didn't trust God. They disobeyed God. And the earth fell, and mankind fell into separation from God spiritually, because God is 100% holy and righteous. And once man had disobeyed God, he was no longer holy and righteous, and so that fellowship was broken. And God cursed the land and had warned them that they would die spiritually and physically. So verse 3, when Adam had lived 130 years, he became the father of a son in his own likeness according to his image, and named him Seth. Well, there were probably other children before Seth. We're just speculation, but this is a record that Seth was born when Adam was 130 years old. Then the days of Adam, after he became the father of Seth, were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. So you see, Adam living a pretty lengthy life. Verse 5 says, so all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. So here we see the verification of the truth of what God had told them, that if they ate of that tree, they would die. Had they not eaten of it, they would not have died. They would have continued to live. Okay, verse 6, and Seth lived 105 years and became the father of Enosh. And again, you'll have to forgive me for pronunciations. I'll mess all these names up pretty good. Then Seth lived 807 years after he became the father of Enosh, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. And Enosh lived 90 years and became the father of Kenan. Then Enosh lived 815 years after he became the father of Kenan, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. We're starting to see a pattern here. Pretty awful pattern. He died. Then Kenan lived 840 years after he became the father of Mahalalel, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died. And Mahalalel lived 65 years and became the father of Jared. Then Mahalalel lived 830 years after he became the father of Jared, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. And Jared lived 162 years and became the father of Enoch. Then Jared lived 800 years after he became the father of Enoch, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years and became the father of Methuselah. Then Enoch walked with God 300 years after he became the father of Methuselah, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So apparently Enoch, we read in an earlier chapter that at some point men began to search for God, try to know God, try to have renewed fellowship with God. We know that there was some kind of a sacrificial system that was going on because of verses in the earlier chapters. But apparently Enoch was one of the men who sought after God, tried to seek God's will, tried to have fellowship with God. And God, even though Enoch was sinful man, because once Adam sinned, that was passed down. The Bible says that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But because Enoch was trying to walk with God, was seeking fellowship with God, God counted that for Enoch as righteousness. And it says God took him. Apparently he didn't die, but God took him in some way to heaven. We'll talk about what that means, heaven. But let's just suffice it to say what the word says right here. It says God took him. He didn't die. God just took him. There's going to be more light shed on that much further along in the Bible. And Methuselah lived 187 years and became the father of Lamech. Then Methuselah lived 782 years after he became the father of Lamech, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And Lamech lived 182 years and became the father of a son. And now he called his name Noah, saying, "This one shall give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands arising from the ground which the Lord has cursed." Then Lamech lived 595 years after he became the father of Noah, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 770 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And that's where we stop today. Now, people have tried to calculate, the age of the, ages based upon these genealogies. But it's a little tough because, as we pointed out, they're not all inclusive. But there have been calculations made, and we're going to see in the next chapter about how long it's been from the time of Adam's creation up until the time of the great flood of Noah. And because these people have lived so long, hundreds and hundreds of years, you can imagine what the population by now must be. Just looking ahead a little bit, and I don't have the exact number right off the top of my head, but I think it's close to 1,650 years have elapsed between the time Adam was created and the time of Noah. So that's a long period of time, especially for people that are living so long, and they're having all the other sons and daughters, other sons and daughters, other sons and daughters, and then those sons and daughters who aren't even listed, they're having kids. So you can imagine what the population of the earth is at the time Noah arrives on the scene. Now this verse, it talks about verse 29. Now he called his name Noah, saying, "This one shall give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands arising from the ground which the Lord has cursed." There are different opinions on what that actually means, but we're going to see that the world during this time from Adam to Noah has become so perverse and so terrible. There's going to be examples in the next chapter how bad it was, that God is going to decide to wipe out the earth, but he's going to preserve a remnant. Noah, just like Enosh, walked with the Lord and was God counted that toward him as some kind of righteousness and took him without dying. Noah also found favor with the Lord, and the Lord is going to use Noah to preserve a remnant, and that remnant has survived all the way up until today. And eventually, within that remnant was God's solution to solve the curse that had been placed on the earth. So when it says in verse 29, "This one shall give us rest from the work and from the toil of our hands arising from the ground which the Lord has cursed," it's like Noah's descendants, the remnant that will be preserved through Noah's strain, will be the source of our salvation, ultimately way down the road. So I think that's the most credible of the interpretations of what that means. So, wow, in one chapter, chapter 5, we cover genealogies that cover about 1,650 years, and we see how the curse is implemented. So-and-so lived so many hundred years and died. So-and-so lived 100 years and died. So-and-so lived hundreds of years and died. And we're going to see in the next chapter what happened, how bad things got during that period of time. Well, next time we'll pick up in chapter 6, and it's going to get kind of exciting when we get into chapter 6. And that's going to be a long one, so we'll we'll cut this one off for today. Hope this has been helpful and interesting to you. See you next time. Bye-bye.